Hey everyone, CPO here, and in this video I'm going to show you the swap out from the factory Vega tire on my OneWheel XR to a Hoosier. This is the Flight Fins version of that, the Trail 2. And quite frankly, I had a hard time deciding whether or not I was going to do the Trail 2, or I also have the Float Life Burris Trail Pro. So I have a Trail 2 and a Trail Pro. And both of them seem to be sort of neck and neck on the top of the pecking order as far as treaded tires go for the OneWheel. The problem is, depending on who you ask, one of them is better than the other. And every time you ask somebody new, they tell you the different one. So I figured the only thing I can do to know for sure which one I like best is try them both. So this video is me actually installing and taking a first ride on the Flight Fins Hoosier Trail 2. I picked it first because, quite frankly, I bought it first. It was in stock, I got it, and then eventually I got the Trail Pro. So yeah, separate video for that. This video, though, does have some tricks and tips for toolless bead breaking, tire removal, tire replacement. As a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll throw up on the screen time hacks for the different parts of the video so that if you don't want to watch the whole thing or you don't want to scrub around looking for something specific, you can figure out exactly where you want to go. I'll just throw them up here real quick for you. So first will be the actual disassembly and removal of the tire from the OneWheel XR. Second one will be me breaking the bead on my current tire and wheel set. Then I will do reinstalling the new Hoosier onto the wheel, onto the rim, and then reassembly of the tire and wheel combo back on to the XR, and then finally I'll just do some ride video. So spoiler alert, like right away, super squirrely, going from the stock Vega to the Hoosier Trail 2. It's squirrely sounds negative, but it's a different ride for sure. As a matter of fact, in the first few seconds of just sort of playing out and figuring out the balance points as compared to where I was used to them on the Burris, I fell off like almost right away, just practicing and seeing, you know, with heel-toe pivots, like where that sweet spot was, and it rolls over fast. So there's sort of an edge on this tire I'll talk about a little bit more, and it makes it feel more like rolling on a ball with a quick drop-off than it is like a flat spot that sort of pivots and then wants to rotate back to flat. It's more, feels more rounded with defined edges. But anyway, yeah, so I did this because I want to go off-road, and look, I'm a Jeeper. I know the difference between a treaded tire and a non-treaded tire in off-road conditions, so got it. I know you can ride off-road in a slick, but why would you if you don't have to? So I'm going to put treads on, and that's my plan. Anyway, guys, here you go. Let's do it. All right, so first thing we're going to do is get to disassembling the OneWheel. So I'm taking off the fender, which I have. If you have not a fender, then you don't have to worry about this step. Flipping it over and then removing the 4 screws that hold the float plates and the bumper on. And notice the screws are different, like they're different lengths. So keep track of that as you disassemble. Just, you know, friendly reminder, because some people throw them all in the same bucket and then don't know which ones were the longer ones or the shorter ones. So I try and keep track of those things. I also have these fangs that need to come off, and these replace the front bolts that hold the bumper on, and then the bumper just slides off, and yeah, that is that. So there is this protective plate that needs to come off so you can get to the connectors. So I'll remove that now, and then we'll get to the connectors here in a second. Now, you have to get to these screws on the bottom side of the rail, and I have this clear plastic protective covering. I didn't put it on, I bought this used, but I need to remove that. I tend to like to use plastic trim tools for things like this, so grab my trusty plastic trim tool and pull that off, and then the adhesive that's on there, I'm just gonna roll off with my fingers. Now, you can reuse that adhesive. I mean, it stayed on and stayed pretty flat, so you know, I could have put a piece of tape over it or something to keep it from getting dirty and then stuck that plastic right back on there. But I'm going to use just some silicone adhesive to reapply it. I have a feeling I'm going to be pulling it off again soon anyway. So next I'm going to pull off the little tiny screws that hold the clips for the cable in place, and then just sticking those screws right back into the clips so I don't lose track of them. Although I do have a little glass bowl next to me on the bench that you can't see, it's out of camera view, but it's where I keep all of my parts, and then also helpful to know that I didn't miss anything, because if the glass bowl is empty, that means I put it all back on the XR. So then there's 2 more clips on this other side. In hindsight, I probably only needed to remove one side of the clips, but it is what it is. Then there is this little top plate on the axle that is held on by 2 screws. I'm removing that, which will make it easy to separate. Now going to these plugs, pull the white clip out and then press on the button as you sort of gently pull, or in this case pry it open, and then that other center one, you turn the nut just a little bit, and then that will allow it to free up. And then you just pull these 2. These are the only ones you have to remove to actually remove the tire. I've seen a lot of people like take off the front foot pad and all that stuff. I don't know why you would do that. If you're just doing a tire, it's not necessary. All right, so then there are these 4 axle bolts that I'm breaking free. And then once you get all 4 of those broke, you're basically ready to pull the tire out. All right, so flip it over. So the OneWheel is upside down, and it should just slide right down away from the tire, just like that. Pretty easy. Now I have to sort of clean up because there's a lot of dirt everywhere. So now I'm going to remove my valve cover there, which happens to be a die, which is kind of cool. And then this is a valve core removal tool. This actually came with the armadillos that I got, but you can get them at bike shops or car shops or auto parts stores, wherever. Remove the core, just be careful. It's under a lot of air pressure, so when you do that, if you don't sort of hang on to it, it'll shoot across the room. And then I just put it back on just to keep track of it. All right, so for the breaking the bead, you can see here I used 2 pieces of wood just to keep the axle off the ground so the tire fits flush on the wheel. But this is hard. Like, some people can sit there and do this and push it, but I'm not that guy. I would rather do it the easy way. So I just grabbed another piece of wood. This is just literally to keep that axle off the ground. And then these are little 1x6s, 1x6x4s. They're like $3 at Home Depot. I just have a few laying around. Put it right to the edge of the bead, and body weight does some wonders. And I weigh like 170, so not a lot of weight to break this. Maybe a little bit of a bounce here and there. Flip it over, break the other side, and then you're good to go. So toolless bead breaking at its finest. Now there is a little slot there in the wheel, in the rim. So if you can get the tire up into that slot, the other side is able to freely rotate over and get over that lip. So that's the secret, is to get the one side, the opposite side of the that you're working on, into that little like divot or valley or whatever you want to call that. And then I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side. And there's a lot of that. I think this is a combination of a variety of different tire sealants in there, but I'm trying to avoid getting that all over me as I do this. So, but same thing, get that the one side of the bead pushed up in there, which allows you to get it over the other lip of the rim there. So, and I'm not doing anything. I'm not like most videos are like, oh, like, I'm going to show you how to do this, and then they cut to the part where they finish it. You just saw real time me removing this tire off of the rim. So I didn't do any fancy video magic or anything like that. Now, if you're going to keep the tire, which I'm going to do, you might sop up all that extra sealant, and then I just took it out and washed it with a hose. So using regular Windex on the new tire, set it flat. Same thing. Get one edge into that little depression, and then rotate and spin, and it goes right in nice and easy. More Windex on this side. This one's a little bit more challenging to do because of the fact that you've got the wheel now stationary and you're trying to work the tire as opposed to the other way around. And with the Windex, the tire is actually kind of slippery, so it's hard for me to actually get a grip on this as I'm pushing on it. So it takes me a little while. Again, I'm not going to cut and show you like, oh, ta-da, it's done, without showing you any hassle that came up. So this was the hassle. It was just the tire was really slippery, really soft, and eventually I was able to get it to a point where it flipped over And I think it's probably when I wore all the Windex off the outside. But the Windex is critical to getting it to slip on. It really does make a big difference. All right, so one other thing, so I'm pulling out that core that I already put in. So I'm going to seat the two beads with a bicycle pump. No air compressor, nothing like that. I had heard it can be done, but it's pretty rare. Thought I would give it a try, and actually it worked out really well in this case. I just kept pumping. It didn't take very long for the first side to seat, and you'll hear a little pop. Wait for it. All right, there we go. So now I'm gonna work on the second side. That was the bottom. I can see the top still needs to be seated, and I just keep pumping up. Never did I hit past like 30 or 35 PSI, so it doesn't take a lot. It just takes some volume. What I did decide to do, since that one hadn't quite seated yet, is take it, spray it down with some Windex, maybe let that seep in there and make it just slippery enough that it finishes. I just need to overcome that friction. And then here we go, wait for it. Whew. Boom, there we go. Nice big burst of air as that seated that last bead. So once you do that, just remove the bike pump, and you can do this with an air compressor. It lets all the air out, but that's okay because we're actually gonna put in sealant. I'm using Armadillo's Red, and I put about 3/4 of a bottle in there. I think you're supposed to use the whole bottle or half a bottle if you want less weight. I just went with 3/4, seemed like a good, healthy combination. And then put the core back in, tighten it down with the core tool, and then now I'm gonna air it up. And I aired it up to about 17 PSI, somewhere between 16 and 18. And then, yeah, that's where I'm gonna start riding with it. And there we go. That is putting on the Hoosier Flight Fins Trail 2 tire onto a OneWheel XR wheel. And now I'm shaking up all of that sealant to make sure it gets good and spread around in there. Now we'll put everything back together. XR goes upside down on the table, and then the wheel comes in over the top. Just make sure you have the cable side going on the side where the cables go. I mean, that's pretty easy to look at. And then what I did is I lifted it up into place, and then I went ahead and screwed in the axle bolts just to hold everything together. Now, when I reassemble anything that's going to be subject to vibration or rotational forces, I use thread lock, whether it be on vehicles, bikes, or OneWheels. So I am thread locking all of these. However, right now I'm just putting the bolts in to get everything in place. And then I will, before I tighten them down, pull them one at a time, add blue or medium strength thread locker, and in that way I can ensure that it's not gonna vibrate loose. I'm one of those guys that likes to put all the bolts in first, at least loose, before you start tightening them down. That way, if something is a little bit cattywampus or cockeyed, then you know, you can get it set into place before you start really tightening things down. So again, all 4 of these tightened, going through and thread locking. Every single fastener I put back onto this gets thread locked. I don't know the torque specs on these. I don't think anybody does. So good and tight. That's the torque spec I'm using. Remembering that you know, you don't want to do damage. You know, you don't need to go all crazy monster on it, but I do want it to be tight enough that it's not going to vibrate. All right, so once those axle bolts are back in, I'm going to now plug everything back into place, make sure that that wire is routed where it needs to go right along the rail. And then basically these are just going to click in to place, and then that plastic safety tab, that white one, gets pushed back down. And this one, I had to just make sure that I understood the orientation of the plug. I didn't want to like cram it in there in the wrong direction, but it can only sort of go in one way. So just take it easy, clamp it down, and then it's going to rotate to lock into place. This little cover goes back on before you put the bumper on, and it's held in place by the bumper screws. And yeah, the bumper slides right back into place. Then, and then of course, if you've got float plates like I do, these are the V3 from Float Life. So more thread lock, and then keeping in mind, remember there were 2 different sizes of these screws, so make sure you know which ones were which. And then screw those back into place. Again, they're all sort of lightly inserted until I get them all in, and then I'll go back around and tighten them all up. All right, then I have the fangs that go back on, which actually are the front 2, they replace the front 2 bolts for the bumper into the foot pad. So tightening those down, little thread locker, of course, flip it over. All right, and then the last thing I need to do here is put these retaining clips on. So this one clip over the axle. Here's a tip: if you have little tiny screws, what I'll usually do is just dump a spot of thread lock onto the table, and then and just sort of dredge the screw tip into there. It's a great way. The other tip I usually do is I'll just grab a toothpick and put some thread lock on a toothpick and do it like that. All right, so and then I just get all these other side rail clips done. Same thing, just a tiny smidge of thread lock, and then good to go there. Fender back on, 4 bolts to hold it. Now a quick function test, just to make sure everything's functioning properly. I think that's important, especially after unplugging things and playing with the motor. So everything looks good there. Now finally, I'm gonna put back on these plastic protector sheets over the bottom of the frame. And like I said, I'm just using a silicone. It's an adhesive designed for like plastic. I actually used it for some plexiglass like window. Works great. And I could probably smooth the whole thing out and make it nice and pretty, but I'm just using dots for now. And like I said, I'm going to be pulling this off probably again soon to swap tires after a few 100 miles. So I'm just going to put it on there, and it cures pretty quickly. And those dots will hold that in place, no problem. So doing that on both sides, and then really that is it. I mean, it was a pretty simple job. I stopped a few times because I had things to do in between, and with filming, of course, I have to move the camera, change up lights and all that stuff. So I don't know exactly how long it took, but it's as easy as you saw. I didn't do any camera trickery or magic in editing to make that look any easier than it was. So this is the first ride. I do have all of my safety protective gear on, particularly when I'm either trying new things or playing around a little bit. But you can see here, the very first thing I do is go out here and start playing with that heel to toe roll to feel like where that edge is. And it didn't take me very long to realize it falls off a lot quicker than I'm used to with the factory tire. The whole tire is a little bit more rounded profile, a little bit more ball-like. But then there's that like sharp edge, and then it just rolls off. And so it didn't take long to find that spot and get used to it, but it is definitely different. It's a different profile than the Vega, which seems to be a little bit more flat. Now, my understanding is a lot of people like this in a tire, and they actually seek it out, and that's why a lot of people like the Pint, because it has a similar characteristic. But anyway, cruising around my usual route. This is, I run this 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a day, this little lap around the lake. It's about a mile. So just playing around, getting a sense for the feel of it in, a couple minutes. It is more squirrely, and I don't know of a better word to use right now. Less stable. All of those sound like negatives. I don't know that they're negatives. It's just different. It feels different. But it will get away from you a lot quicker. So that's one thing, like at speed, going, in the faster range, and I'm not a speed demon by any means, so at speed to me is like 10 miles an hour, right? At the faster range though, it can get really wobbly if you're not careful. So just get used to it before you go out full speed on this thing. So I'm gonna do a couple quick braps right here. Brap. I love those. If you ride a OneWheel, you know exactly what that sound is. Brap. So yeah, brapping around, and then I'm gonna come over here to the park and hit the grass, because really what I want this tire to do is be an off-road tire for me. So why not just take it right off-road to begin with, and runs really smooth. I don't have any complaints. It actually feels really stable in the grass. Yeah, it is what it is. So I'm gonna let you watch the rest of this a little bit. I'll do a little, close at the end, but I'll give you some music to listen to, and you can just watch this tire roll. Yeah. All right, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you maybe learned something new if you were looking for something of that nature. Stay tuned. I'm going to run on this tire for a while, and then I will eventually put on the Trail Pro and then get a sense for how I like or dislike it, or how I think it's different. Remember, my perspective is fairly new to OneWheel, not new to board sports necessarily. So I sort of have foundational riding ability down, but definitely new to OneWheel and getting used to the characteristics of this particular type of board. So all of my opinions are jaded with that fact, which might be helpful because I have the new opinion. Those of you guys who have been riding for a long time forgot what it was like to be new on the OneWheel. So sometimes my opinion may actually be helpful. Anyway, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.